Bangladesh receives the largest amount of U.S. development assistance and global funding in the region. Bangladesh is considered a moderate Muslim country, receives the most attention for counterterrorism efforts, yet continues to struggle. Since 2013, several bloggers and international activists have been brutally killed, 6 in the past 12 months alone. I offer my deepest condolences to the family and friends of USAID employee and local human rights activist who was brutally murdered just a few short weeks ago. Bangladesh also continues to struggle with democratic governance, the rule of law, and corruption. The request for assistance to Bangladesh reflects an increase of $13.5 million. I'd also asked the panel to discuss overall assistance to Bangladesh as it results to countering violent extremism and providing for further freedom of expression without violent recourse. I also want to understand what specific programs are we putting in place to meet these challenges.
Bangladesh, the chair noted many of the concerns. Despite development progress, there's the continued incidence of extreme poverty, the growth of Islamic extremism. Murderers are working their way through a publicly circulated list of politically active members of religious minorities. Less than 2 weeks ago, School Haz Manam, a USAID employee, Mr. Stivers, was brutally murdered for his activism in human rights. The home of a Christian family was bombed, and just last weekend, a Sufi saint was murdered. I look forward to hearing how we're addressing these concerns.
Thank you. We're happy today to be joined by Assistant Secretary Nisha Biswal of the Department of State's Bureau of South and Central Asian Affairs and Assistant Administrator Jonathan Stivers of the U.S. Agency for International Development Bureau for Asia. We're appreciative to have both of you here today, sharing your time with us, and I'll recognize Ms. Biswal first. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, Ranking Member Sherman. Thank you very much for the invitation to testify today, and I would ask that my full written statement be submitted for the record so that I may summarize.
Without objection.
As you know, Mr. Chairman, I spent the formative years of my career working as a professional staff member on this committee, and so it has instilled in me a long-standing respect for the important role of Congress in our foreign policy, and it's an honor and a pleasure to be here before the committee. It's also a deep pleasure to be here with my good friend and former House colleague, John Stivers. John and I just returned from Bangladesh, and we were there in the aftermath of the terrorist attack on Zulhas Manan, and I want to thank both of you and the committee for the strong support of USAID and the U.S. Embassy and the condemnation of this heinous act. I do believe that Zulhas's death reminds us of the risks that our diplomats and development professionals face, and it's important to honor their sacrifices. And again, I thank you for your strong support in that vein. Mr. Chairman, as you noted, South Asia is at a pivotal point in its development. It is on the cusp of a new era of opportunity, but it is also buffeted by stark challenges, as both of you have noted. The strong U.S. partnership with the region is critical to addressing global issues of the utmost importance, mitigating climate change, combating violent extremism, ensuring maritime security, eradicating disease, decreasing poverty, and so much more, as well as unleashing a new era of opportunity, of growth, and of shared prosperity. In Bangladesh, we are investing in a key strategic partner in both regional and global challenges such as climate change, food security, reducing poverty, advancing health and peacekeeping. And many challenges remain in this dynamic country despite remarkable progress in many of these areas. 1/3 of Bangladeshis still live in poverty. Its geography makes it susceptible to the impacts of climate change, and adequate protections for workers are still very much a work in progress. Yet, as both of you noted, many of the gains that Bangladesh has made in human development and economic growth risk being undermined by escalating extremist violence. As I noted, the recent slaying of Zulhas Manan, a respected and admired advocate for human rights, has shined an international spotlight on this increasing threat to Bangladesh's diverse and tolerant society. During our visit, John and I underscored Secretary Kerry's message to the government and to the Prime Minister and the people of Bangladesh that the United States will work with them in this fight against violent extremism, and that during a time of such challenge, it is all the more important to respect the rule of law, political rights, and the ability for Bangladeshis to be able to speak freely. But Bangladesh has a history of overcoming difficult challenges, and we're hopeful that with determined partnership, we can also help Bangladesh defeat the extremists and terrorists that threaten their vibrant society. Finally, let me just conclude by recognizing that the rebalance to Asia that the President has put as one of the centerpieces of his foreign policy is fundamentally a recognition that the security and the prosperity of the American people is inextricably linked with the security and prosperity of Asia. And nowhere is that more evident than in the South Asia region, and we look forward to continued engagement with the important countries and people of that region. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stivers.
Thank you. Chairman Salmon, Ranking Member Sherman, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the invitation to testify today on advancing U.S. foreign policy goals in South Asia. It's an honor to be back again before this committee, especially alongside my friend and colleague, Assistant Secretary Nisha Biswal. Before I begin, I'd like to extend the deepest condolences to the family and friends of Zulhaz Manan. He was a member of the USAID family in Bangladesh, and he was brutally murdered late last month. Zulhaz embodied the very best of USAID. He was an heroic leader for human rights, including on LGBTI issues. His tragic loss is a reminder of the risks that our staff take every day in the field to improve the lives of the most vulnerable people. Last week, Nisha and I were able to meet with his family and friends to better understand his life and legacy and what he was fighting for in Bangladesh, in addition to the growing violent extremism in that country. We are urging the Bangladesh government at the highest levels to fully investigate this violent attack and others and bring the perpetrators to justice. We are also ensuring the safety and security of our staff is our highest priority in this difficult operating environment. We're working through three primary approaches at USAID. First, we're pioneering a new model of development that focuses on leveraging our impact and our funding by using public-private partnerships, science, innovation, and regional solutions. For example, in India, while our assistance dollars have been steady, the total value of U.S. development programs has doubled because we're leveraging the private sector and international donors to move forward and make progress on a lot of the very important human development and health outcomes that we want to have there. Second, we're building pathways out of poverty through integrated approaches with the three presidential initiatives on global health, Feed the Future, and global climate change. And third, we're promoting democratic governance and empowering reformers because we know that the best chance in promoting democratic change is to empower the reformers to change their country. In Bangladesh, USAID has helped the country make enormous progress in recent years. They've been able to cut their poverty rate in half. They've reduced deaths of mothers and children by more than 2/3. They've improved the management of 2.5 million acres of forest and wetlands, home of the endangered Bengal tiger. And we've helped introduce new rice varieties that can withstand flooding and high salt levels. And as a result, Bangladesh now does not have to rely heavily on rice imports. Despite this progress and the tradition of tolerance in Bangladesh, rising violent extremism is a threat to the country's development. USAID supports those who represent a democratic, pluralist society in Bangladesh, such as civil society and journalists. USAID also works to address a weak judicial system by strengthening the ability of the institution to uphold the rule of law and bring perpetrators of violent extremism to justice. We will continue to analyze, update, and implement our strategies to best help the reformers increase and maintain the right of the Bangladeshi people to freely express themselves through their religion or their political views.
I've got a couple of follow-up questions. However, I've only got a minute and a half, and I wanted to shift over to Bangladesh. So let me do that kind of quickly here as well. The first time I was in Bangladesh, Khalida Zia was in power. And when I went back most recently, which was maybe 2 years ago, Sheikh Hasina was in power and met with both of them, on both those occasions. Obviously, they have different points of view on a whole range of issues. But The most recent time, it was a couple of months before the election that didn't, well, the election happened, but it was boycotted by Khalida Zia's party. And are there a couple of questions? One, do they anticipate elections anytime in the near future, or what's the status on that at this point? And then, most importantly, relative to the violence that we've seen with the Islamist extremists that have literally hacked people to death and other horrific things. In general, it tends to be when people have criticized extremism, those people are targeted. Do you see that as being an ongoing phenomenon? What is the government trying to do to push? What are they doing to crack down on it without expressing or without suppressing freedom of speech and the press, et cetera? All in about 30 seconds.
Thank you, Congressman. With respect to the elections, my understanding is that the next elections would take place in 2019. I have not heard any indication that there would be a earlier timetable in terms of the term, when the term is set to expire. We do continue to urge that there be a more inclusive political process and that the democratic space in the country be expanded to allow for peaceful political activity. There has been a history of political violence in Bangladesh, including particular spate of political violence in 2015, which was of concern, and we noted it both publicly and privately in our conversations with political parties. So I think that is going to continue to be a space that we need to engage on and to continue to bring to bear some pressure to see some additional progress on political inclusion in Bangladesh, but also a respect for a violence-free space in politics in Bangladesh.
Shifting over to Bangladesh, Mr. Stivers, you remembered thoughtfully the USAID worker and human rights activist who was slaughtered most recently. On Sunday, the New York Times editorial board wrote about how Bangladesh has descended into lawlessness. I introduced a resolution last year calling on the government of Bangladesh to protect the rights of religious minorities in the country, including Christians, secularists, atheists, Hindus, Buddhists, etc. Can you speak to what is your sense of the situation, the government's response? What should they be doing more than they're already be doing specifically?
Thank you, Congresswoman. Over the last few years, the domestic and global situations have kind of combined to contribute to increasing radicalization. I think domestically in Bangladesh, increased political violence, polarization of political parties are key contributors, and there's a lack of political space and free expression that are real challenges for that government in Bangladesh. And I'll defer to Nisha to talk about kind of her discussions with the government there. But let me just say, I mean, we know the targets include writers, activists, and intellectuals, and certainly religious minorities. And thank you for being such a champion on this issue, because you've identified this issue, long before some of these attacks have happened. And I think our development programs at USAID can help mitigate some of the underlying drivers of violent extremism. Certainly our support for civil society, human rights, voices of tolerance, journalists can help push back on some of that closing space in Bangladesh. We do work with the judiciary, and I know DOG and the Bangladesh police, support each other on community policing efforts. And so our work in this sphere to promote free expression, to promote those reformers who are pushing for more free expression and democracy and better governance in Bangladesh, those are the folks that we support at USAID. And Zulhaz Manan was really a hero in pushing on those exact things.
If I may add to what John has said, this is obviously an area of mounting concern for us and was the focus of our meetings and conversations with the government. We met with not only the Foreign Ministry, but Home Ministry and law enforcement officials, and we met with the Prime Minister to discuss what we could do in terms of both providing support and partnership in strengthening the capacity and the ability of the government, of law enforcement to, one, protect vulnerable communities and prevent acts of terror, but then two, to investigate and hold accountable when there is violence. And it's incredibly important that there be a very focused effort to fully investigate and bring to justice when there are attacks of this nature, and how we can be supportive in that context. We also talked about the need for us to work with civil society organizations to ensure that they also have access to tools and training and information with respect to their own security. And so there is an effort underway right now from the United States to see what more we can bring to bear in terms of tools, technology, and resources. We've got a team heading out this week with my deputy, our Ambassador Bill Todd, who formerly served as the Assistant Secretary in INL, but he's going along with a team from the Counterterrorism Bureau, from the CSO office, and others. And quite frankly, we expect that we will be engaging in a fairly intensive effort in the weeks and months to come to see how we can further strengthen efforts to secure vulnerable populations and to turn the tide on extremism and terrorism in Bangladesh.
Thank you, Ms. Biswal. I'm over my time, but in closing, in all of your remarks, you talked about the tools that the U.S. is trying to provide to support the Bangladesh government, but you didn't talk about the leadership and the resolve that must begin and come from the government of Bangladesh if there is to be any progress. There's tools, and then there's leadership and commitment to standing against these acts of terrorism and extreme violence, and a commitment to hold those perpetrators accountable. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.